Thank you for joining us this afternoon for the Indigenous Waste Management Stream. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land which we gather today, the Ngumbungia people. I pay my respects to their enduring connection to land, sky and water. I extend my respect to elders past and present and warmly welcome Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us here today, both in person and online. Caring for country and connection to culture remains critical to the work that we do. In this stream, each presenter will have 20 minutes, including Q&A. At the conclusion of each presenter, we'll gather questions from our online audience. You're all welcome to add your questions into Slido. And just before we begin, please ensure your phones are off or on silent. Our first speaker this afternoon is Nathan Catterall. Nathan is the Senior Project Officer at the New South Wales Environment Protection Authority. Nathan's presenting to us on an evaluation of EPA's Aboriginal waste management programs. Welcome, Nathan.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would also like to acknowledge country, and I'd like to acknowledge the Ngumbungia people for having me on country. Being an Aboriginal man myself, I'm from a Wabikal country, from Maitland, down the Maitland area. We are all very lucky to have the oldest living culture in the world, in excess of 65,000 years. Aboriginal people manage country in a way that we, recycle. We manage country for what it is. Our waste was disposed of back into country in that circular economy space. And now we're in a new space in 2025 where we're managing different types of waste. I'm very passionate about country. We get what we give to Mother Earth, and I respect her first and foremost. So I'd like to acknowledge country. I'd like to pay my respects to any elders past, present and future. So moving on, I am currently the acting unit head for the Aboriginal Community Waste Management team, and we recently did an evaluation of the Aboriginal waste management programs. I'll move that slide. The EPA, so we run two programs. We commissioned an Aboriginal consultant to conduct an in-depth evaluation of two key initiatives. So the first program was the Aboriginal Land Cleanup and Prevention Program, and the second program was the Aboriginal Community Waste Management Program. So the Aboriginal Cleanup Program was available, or applicants was available to all land councils, where the ACWMP program was available for application by discrete Aboriginal communities, which are former missions or reserves, and there's 61 of those across the state of New South Wales. The review of the waste program. So the review highlighted the successes and areas for improvement, with a focus on flexibility, collaboration, and a community support to drive community-led solutions. I'm pulling it down here. So the EPA, the review of the OutCup and ACWMP, the objectives of the OutCup program were to clean up and prevent illegal dumping, build partnerships with communities, implement deterrence and education, and embedded cultural land care practices. The ACWMP objectives were to reduce waste and litter, co-design waste management plans, deliver cleanups, infrastructure and employment. The program impact, so since the inception of the programs, I think it was 2007, there's been over $5 million invested within the programs, and the objectives within both of the programs were to strengthen Aboriginal community pride, in taking ownership of waste management areas within their communities, inspire local initiatives such as designing custom signage for bins and looking at ways that communication and using different communication methods to try and get our younger generations involved with waste management. Education and training events, so that holding events across communities. and looking at security for problem waste areas. So looking at areas that have had waste dumped. So a lot of times that people from outside the Aboriginal communities know that the waste, the crown or land that's been under native title, the waste gets dumped there because they assume that the Aboriginal communities can afford to go and clean it up, and it's this evolution of issues that are created for our community. So reuse centres that also act as community hubs. So some of the funding out Brungle, Tumut, out the DAC out Tumut Way was invested in building a facility where the community can actually go and put stuff and resell it or recycle it, give it back out to the community. That would include clothing, old furniture, used recycled furniture, and then also generate revenue out of that space as well. And the obvious problem is waste removal. So removing the initial waste that's been there, for many years. What worked well, and this is across both programs. So what worked well, there's significant coverage across New South Wales. The program worked in 39 of the 61 DACs, discrete Aboriginal communities. We established really good connections with community. Capacity building via community gatherings and local events. So obviously the opening and closing of local, the completion of events, meeting with community on site throughout the program's life cycle. The installation of deterrence methods such as gates and barriers and fencing and cameras. So it stopped waste being dumped in specific areas. But what we also found is that waste would obviously be transferred to other sites, and then we'd be playing catch up. The challenges. So the challenges for community, onerous grant administration and too prescriptive, and they were lacking flexibility. So a LAUC or a DAC has one CEO, and they've got so many various touch points from government organisations and private organisations trying to get in and have these discussions with the CEO to resolve issues. The CEOs have obviously got other priorities in relation to housing, community health and taking care of their community. And then our organisations are coming in, and communities want the funding to resolve the problems, but it's managing and administering that funding that they don't have the capacity because of the workload that they've got in that space. So regional location and skill shortage. So obviously in remote areas, we working in places that I talked with before, Munga, out at Kenya and Brewarrina and Dubbo, and really remote locations of the state. So looking at trying to build those skills within communities is very challenging. High turnover of staff, project delivery and natural disasters. So EPA has turnover of staff, and project manage and structural change. The CEOs have changed, and they change quite regularly because the role that a CEO of a land council is very hard. It's a very hard role, and the CEOs are quite under a lot of pressure, whether it be from community and managing all the other issues that they've got within their community. So making sure that those, the staffing is sort of try and managed. Natural disasters, COVID was a big deal back in the day because the grants were rolled out. Obviously changes, people weren't working in offices, and we had fires down the coast, pretty much right across New South Wales, and then we had floods, which really impacted the way that we delivered our programs. Also caused more waste problems and issues and environmental problems. Difficult to address problems of waste like asbestos. So recently we're up in Kempsey, just generally managing our waste program, uncovered asbestos, illegally dumped asbestos in one of the remote communities. I think it was at Green Hills off the top of my head, and trying and divert the funding to manage that waste. But then if there's larger amounts, it's not within the program's capacity to be able to manage that. I think that was a 10K amount of asbestos, but posed a risk to the community, health risk. opportunities for improvement. For both programs, the evaluation found that stronger collaboration between government agencies was necessary. Like I said before, there's too many touch points for the CEO, too many government organisations going into our communities and saying, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this, but we're not delivering. And that's exactly what happens. The way that improved data, so there's long-term data capture that we could use to see what waste is being out there and what waste is being collected and what's being managed across the state. Better support is required for the applicants. So what I've found since managing the program, I've only been managing the program for 9 months, is that we need to be in community. We can't be managing community from a desk. We need to be getting out and actually talking to community face to face, having a discussion, and then working together in collaboration with our community. Better support for successful applicants. So looking at how the funds are managed and strategically managed, and assisting the LAUC or the CEO to engage with contractors or engage with services outside of the capacity of their day-to-day operations. Because sometimes when the expectations of LAUC that's going to engage, and I found that with one of the LAUCs mentioned before, is that the cost will be inflated when a LAUC or a DAC goes and applies and tries to get the funding. We have the power as organisations, private and government organisations, to ensure that our communities are getting value for money and not being ripped off. Changing the reporting and application process. So making sure that the reporting and application process is easier to follow than previous. The key success factors, looking forward into the new program, looking at developing a community leadership, so engaging with the community so they're in control of their own programs, not us in control of the program. Building capacity within communities to manage their waste long term, not going in and just cleaning up waste and having a contractual arrangement where we're just going to remove the waste and that's the end of the contract, closed, finished. Let's look at the long-term objectives on how we're managing waste to ensure that we're impacting our community's health and well-being long-term and developing those relationships with councils and various other organisations. Enabling better access to training and education. So, when I personally want to go and see my LAUCs or my DACs and talk with the CEOs, looking at what education needs they need to be able to run the grant funding or run the program moving forward. And that might be financial training, it might be report writing, it might be MS, like stuff on the programs, on basic computer skills to be able to assist our communities to manage these programs. Strengthening relationships with community members, so again, making sure that we're bringing that community together, and developing and strengthening relationships with stakeholders. Making sure that we're going in, and I had this discussion with the Tomra Cleanaway group, is making sure that we're going in with a solution, and we're not going to go in there and promise a solution and then walk away and not deliver it, because that's the worst outcome for a community. We want to go in with a solution and deliver that solution for the better long term and the betterment of our communities. Program redesign, the EPA on country. So we've been investigating working with other agencies, so broader agencies right across the state. It'll be less onerous on the community. Looking at better stakeholder engagement, which I touched on before. And I touched on before, developing the long-term strategy. So developing those partners. Some of the DACs aren't serviced by councils for various reasons. Some of the relationships between various stakeholders and land councils and DACs aren't, that they're a bit rocky. But, I found that going in there, I think within the new program, that we can bring those relationships together and go there as a singular group or group and deliver these programs. Develop long-term solutions to manage waste in a community, looking at the CDS in remote communities and looking at waste servicing, like places like Wilmaringle, which is 105 k's out of town, 205k return for somebody to go and take their waste to a transfer station. realistically, I would like to know how many people in this room are going to travel 200 kilometres to go to a transfer station to take their waste, and it's not cost effective for lower socioeconomic communities and my communities. Consistent delivery across the state, so we're looking at a consistent approach across the state with the same delivery mechanism, so each community is getting the same outcomes based on what they need, based on what the CEOs need, or based on what that entire community needs. Ensuring that the funding and the accountability of the reporting, not only just on the DAC, but with our local communities, with the communities and with our organisation ourselves, that we're getting value for money and we're delivering the outcomes that not only that the EPA needs, the organisation needs, but the value for money that the community need, that they're getting money put where they need it as well within their communities. So just a few photos. So the one up to your left, that's Perfleet Taree. So Perfleet Taree was a trial program that I worked with Roads to Home. So Roads to Home currently work across all the discrete Aboriginal communities. They're working within over 30 communities, 33 communities, I think, at the moment. Ash Dean, one of the project officers up there, reached out and said, you know, Nath, can we look at a program? So we trialled Ash, or the Roads to Home program, being in the DAC and having the relationships with the CEO to deliver the waste removal and management of that program. It was a success, took the pressure off the Lauk CEO. The program was delivered, was cost effective, and they got the outcomes they needed. Down the bottom, Lapa, up the top with me and the Awabakal CEO, and Miriam, and down the bottom with me and one of my team members, Roxy. Some of the programs were delivered across the state. We do get out. The other one down to the right-hand side is Brungle Tumut, and the one up above on the right-hand side is, I believe it's Wahallo. But we do some really good program. We run some really good programs, and I'm looking forward to the new program rolling out within, hopefully, in the next month or so. It's still up for approval, so I can't really discuss that at this point in time, but it's looking really good, and it's shaping up to be a really good opportunity for our communities to manage waste long term and look at those sustainable long term outcomes. Thank you.
Thanks, Nathan. It's great to hear the successes of the programs and acknowledge the challenges, and also look forward to the future of the new opportunities. Our second speaker is William Abbey. William is a microfactory engineer at the Smart Centre at the University of New South Wales in Sydney. William's presenting to us on a circular economy for remote and regional communities, unlocking economic and environmental benefits. Welcome, William.
Thank you, Alison, for that acknowledgement of country to begin the session. It's obviously very important to acknowledge the Gumbaynggirr Nation as the traditional owners and carers of the land. So I would also like to pay my respects to Aboriginal Australians past, present, and in the audience today. I also want to recognise the Bidjigal people. They're the traditional owners of the land UNSW is on, which is where the majority of this research was conducted. Also, if I can invite you all to do something which I've been finding myself doing fairly often in this role, which is just reflecting on our own relationship with country, and think about whether our actions are reflective of our values that we have as well, and perhaps how we might learn from Aboriginal Australians and how they cared for country and how we can better care for country. So my contribution to this session will maybe be a bit different to the other sessions today. I want to share my brief career experience in the world of waste. hopefully offer some value regarding how we can actually shift our perspective of waste to see it as a resource, but also to be here to learn, to be in front of the right people as we express our desire to have further collaboration with Indigenous communities that are trying to tackle their own waste challenges. So if you see an opportunity for collaboration or something in this presentation inspires you, please reach out afterwards. So I'm a microfactory engineer, and I can tell you exactly what that means in a second, but I work at the Centre for Sustainable Materials Research and Technology, or the SMART Centre. For those that don't know, that was founded by Veena Sahajwala at AO, and we take on the challenge of finding new uses for materials that would otherwise be headed to landfill or considered waste. And we like to see it as a resource, and this includes things such as tyres, mattresses, e-waste, and we're even investigating at the moment things like batteries, chip packets, coffee grounds, things like that. So yeah, and that's at UNSW, which is also host to the Sustainable Communities and Waste Hub, or the SCORE Hub. I'm sure you guys are all aware there's a lot of acronyms in this industry, so I'll try to keep it to a minimum. But this is a program from the National Environmental Science Program. Through these hubs, they try to establish relationships and partnerships with scientific institutions, with traditional owners. Nathan, as you were talking about, it's important to get out there and not make assumptions from the office, but also to gather knowledge which we can't gather from the lab, but actually embed ourselves with these communities. And I've been primarily involved in the plastic and waste materials stream. So we had a session earlier on circular economy, so I won't spend too long here. But essentially it is a new term to describe systems where waste is eliminated or designed out of the system entirely. So we go from a take, make, waste, or a linear system, to one where products are held at the highest possible value for as long as possible, and when they no longer can deliver that use, there is consideration for what happens next for that product beyond being put in a hole in the ground or ending in our oceans or ending in our air via incineration. So there are many different definitions or criteria for what a circular economy is, but as Nathan alluded to, it's actually an old concept. And when you communicate, or when I've been out to these communities in regional New South Wales, they actually take a lot of pride in saying these are things we've been doing for a long time. Whether it's putting scraps in the garden or cleaning up bottles for reuse, these aren't new concepts of making the most out of our resources. And especially when we look at the practices of traditional owners, we can definitely have a lot to learn of the old practices when we bring up these new terminologies such as circular economy. So while it might not be a new concept, challenges arise when we, that's okay, that's fine. Challenges arise when we introduce new materials into this stream, whether that's plastics or e-waste or multi-layered components. And new challenges arise as well with just the sheer scale of waste, which we haven't seen before. So that's when things that we've been doing in the past may not be able to cope with this. So here are some stats of where we currently are at. You can probably see that is the graphic work of a scientist, so I apologise, it's a bit dry there. But since the China sword policy, Australia has recognised a great value in adopting, and indeed a great need to adopt more circular practices. And it is also the global consensus that the way we are currently using our finite resources is not sustainable. So what can we do? Recently, just last year, Australia released a circular economy framework, and there was also a whole set of standards for, ISO standards that is, for circular economy. If I can just get a show of hands for who has heard of or even consulted these standards. Yeah, that's great. So obviously there's some uptake there, but something I've gained from communicating with some of these communities is that while they can be helpful in guiding some some practices, what they really portray is like an ideal outcome. But when it comes to making those first steps, especially in non-metropolitan areas, they aren't always the most helpful, and they really don't fulfill their circumstances. So this is where hopefully we can try and come in. We research applications of incorporating waste streams into value-adding opportunities. And also being at the university, we have a unique position of being able to collaborate with industry, government, and other academic institutions in creating these technologies and getting them out of the lab into a market. And from what we've seen from our technologies that have been commercialized, it is those partnerships which are very crucial. So we do these through our microfactory technologies. So a microfactory is designed to be discrete and modular and placed as close to on-site or as close to the waste source as possible to not only just develop that into a material that can be recovered, but actually a product that can provide value to that community. And so I'll play a short video from one of our recently launched microfactories.
Our technology allows us to convert e-waste plastic into remanufactured 3D printer filament, and it's the only one in the world.
We're here at Renew IT's site, and this is indeed the first filament microfactory that we've done out of UNSW that makes plastic filaments from all the plastics that comes out of hardware in the IT world.
So when companies and schools and universities are refreshing their fleet of laptops or technology and data centers, they'll engage in organisations such as us to go in there and collect that old equipment and then on-sell those devices. But as you can imagine, a lot of those devices can't be on-sold. They're either too old or they're broken, and it becomes a waste problem.
So when that first bit of waste arrives at Renew IT's filament microfactory, they disassemble it utilizing UNSW IP to know which are the right plastics to go after, to be able to then feed that into this filament microfactory. So that plastic gets thermally transformed through controlled heat and cooling, and it's finally spooled and can get fed into a 3D printer at the end of the process to be 3D printed into anything that you'd imagine.
We're talking about zero waste here. This really is a horizontal solution that touches every industry that you can think of.
It's so important to show that we can achieve a win-win outcome for our environment, for our economy, and for humanity.
Yeah, so something that is worth noting as well is that when those products do reach the end of the life, they are designed to be reshredded and go back into that circular loop. So that's another important aspect to consider, is this a closed loop solution? Another thing that wasn't brought up in that video, but is also extremely important, is the reason we make filament. Plastic flake per kilo, depending on what it is, goes for roughly $1 a kilo. But a kilo of this 3D printer filament can fetch over $30 a kilo. So it's an opportunity not just to divert from landfill, but also create value that will remain within that community. And as you saw in the video, it takes a relatively small footprint as well. Another microfactory we have is down in Shoalhaven City Council. That's the green ceramic microfactory, which takes crushed, washed glass and combines it with waste textile into a green ceramic product. We also have a video for that, but I won't play that one. But if you're interested, you can follow the link here if the slides are available after. Otherwise, it's just the Smart Centre website. And this is what it makes. It's an Australian-made product that is crystalline silica free. So that is the reason why engineered stone was banned, due to its association with silicosis. And it's an example of a totally circular solution as well, in that it takes partnerships and different organisations all the way from the collection stage to the processing stage, and then partnering with a business that then distributes and markets that. And once again, once those tiles reach the end of their life, they can be returned back into a new process. So these are some of the case studies that we've worked on. Some members of our team were also fortunate enough to join the Rubbish on the Shore think tank. This was in Gakula, Northern Territory, with the Gumtaj clan, where we got to learn about the impacts of marine waste and ghost nets. The outcome of this was that we were able to release a report on the properties of these materials, the composition, and even demonstrated a pilot process similar to the green ceramics, where the ghost nets were combined with waste sawdust and other waste products to create a polymer tile. But of course, something we've learned here through this process, that is, it is the end market that can ultimately justify the need for such programs. I also want to showcase that they were able to make waste as well that made it into the Australian Museum in the form of art. So they not only demonstrated potential in creating a functional material, but also an artistic material that can really even be more important in gathering community engagement. So that comes in, that leads into the Sustainable Communities and Waste Hub and what I'm doing. We have a range of projects happening, and we've collaborated as well with an organisation that is involved in cultural burning, and that's burning not just for hazard reduction, but also for the maintenance of sacred sites and pathways, and looking into how those products, with incorporating their knowledge of fire retardants and termite resistance into new construction materials. We've also done work regarding microplastics and the impact that that can have on the environment, regarding its sources, the pathways and the sinks, and the impact that can have on human health. Personally, I've been involved in a program that is responsible for finding fit-for-purpose recycling technologies, specifically for regional and remote communities. In doing this, I've been out to various councils and businesses in regional New South Wales, and we co-designed a sort of framework where we can establish different roles within the circular supply chain to not only allow for those early transition steps to a more circular economy, but also highlight the importance of different partnerships, whether it's one council focuses on a material supply chain, where another, such as paper and cardboard, where another focuses on organics, but also to demonstrate further downstream opportunities where we don't just process this waste, but we actually recycle and remanufacture that into new products. And so that's what we came up with there. This is still a work in process, but essentially we've done work to harmonise this with the ISO standards and the language that they use. And really, even though it doesn't capture the more upstream aspects of a circular economy, for communities that perhaps don't have that leverage to engage in those things, such as demanding more circular procurement or designing for circular economy, they can at least close the loop on their resources and retain the value from that. So I wrote this into a report using that framework as the different steps where to categorize these technologies and to showcase not just current technology that is being used, but emerging technology, which is 3, 4, 5 years down the line, which if a council is looking to establish a model for circularising, they can look further down the line and use those technologies as well. A council that's been really good at this, of course, is Shoalhaven City Council. I've got a bit of airtime this week, so I'll go quickly through this. But they've been great in doing that, which actually rethinking their collection process and how that will affect the downstream consequences at their recycling plant, and whether they send that to other recyclers or whether they're able to put that into new products in-house. Another thing, after speaking to Peter Windley as well, when talking about these projects, is when he brought up the cost of it, he brought up that solutions such as the polystyrene recycling, not only can he create value from that, but he also diverts that from landfill, which is subsidising the projects. So this isn't something that is available to all councils, but by extending that landfill life, that is, the cost from that is able to subsidise the new projects. Landfill is rapidly running out of space, and even for remote communities, practices such as incineration and dumping are leading to pollutants entering our environment. So it is really important that when we consider our material recovery processes, that we recover what happens past just the material recovery facility. Another good example is Forbes Shire Council and the work that they're doing with organics recovery, turning that into a compost, as well as products that use that compost in new pellets that can go into gardens depending on their needs. Right, so I've written that report, and it's got lots of technology in it and lots of information, but it's not exactly accessible to the people that need it. And what the department has identified is a need to take this resource and expand upon it into something that is more usable, more interactive, and is something that can actually achieve impact. And so what we're planning to do in the future is create an online tool that has the potential to simplify this process of finding fit-for-purpose technology that's out there, empower those communities to make the decisions for themselves depending on what conditions and what requirements they have, as opposed to us sitting in a lab and making recommendations. And what we've also learned is the importance of sharing case studies. So not just saying this is a technology that's out there, but showing this is how it's been implemented and this is what they've learned from it. So we also, learning from that, we want to perhaps use this as a platform for knowledge sharing, where organisations can share their successful case studies, what they've learnt from that, and then also promote themselves as saying, hey, we have this capacity to process this material, please get involved. Or if you have that material, thank you. If you have that material, yeah, we are able to process that, and then perhaps someone else can fulfill another role. I'll move on more quickly. But yeah, so this is still in the planning stages, and we've been inspired by other resources that are already out there, and how can we build upon some things that already exist. But please, if this is something that you think would be valuable, we are still in the process of designing the user requirements and finding how much resources that we can really put to this. So that is something that we do fortunately have as being part of the National Environmental Science Program, is perhaps we can provide resources to organisations that are trying to develop something like this, but maybe don't have the resources themselves. And lastly, to include some other tools such as a funding dashboard that we've developed, which can show opportunities for future funding. So yeah, thank you. I just want to reiterate that primarily resources, we are looking for value-adding opportunities for councils and businesses. But to prove that this is something that we can implement, we need to hear from you guys and from the users, which is why I'm here today. So please reach out, get in touch, and hopefully this becomes a tool that you'll find yourself using in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, William. Your presentation really highlights the valuable contribution of researchers and academia to support the circular economy in regional and remote communities, as well as the industry more broadly. I'd now like to introduce Kylie Roberts-Frost. Kylie is the Chief Executive Officer of the Australian Bedding Stewardship Council, the ABSC. Kylie presents to us From Design to Disposal, Product Stewardship in Remote Australia. Welcome, Kylie.
All right, let's see how this goes. Thanks so much for having me. My name's Kylie Roberts-Frost. I am the CEO of the Bedding Stewardship Council, and my background, I've been running the scheme for about 18 months. Prior to that, I was running an Indigenous-led mattress recycling facility. I was running the ACT operations for Soft Landing. And prior to that, I worked for 20 years in logistics. So in every presentation I do, you will hear me talk about logistics because I think it's such a key part of the challenges we have in Australia, and nowhere is that more true than in remote Australia. So with that out of the way, today I'd really just like to tell you a story on a project that's really important to my team and I, and how we became focused on the very unique challenges in this part of Australia. This partnership that we have is with Tanya Egerton, who is the founder of Circular Nation and the Remote Op Shop project. Some of you may be familiar with that, but Tanya can explain the wonderful work that she does and the context of the Remote Op Shop far better than I can. So what I'm going to do is play a video for you guys.
Living in rural Australia is really about a connection to people and place. My name is Tanya Egerton and I live in Katherine, Northern Territory with my husband Quentin and our 2 dogs. I was living and working in Katherine as an Indigenous business facilitator in 2016 when a group of women from the remote community of Jutmingan called me saying we're being forced to participate in a Work for the Dole program. They were turning up for 25 hours a week, otherwise their payment would be cut, and they were given nothing to do. The women said, look, we are creative women, we love to paint, we love to sew, we love to weave, and we want to start our own art centre, but we want to self-fund the art centre. We went out and sat with them and started looking at all the different opportunities for them to self-fund the art centre, and an op shop emerged as a potential opportunity. So we ended up putting a call out on Facebook looking for a couple of boxes of clothing to get started, and we ended up with 30,000 people sharing that post within a couple of days. We had 35 drop-off locations across the country. We had volunteers picking and packing boxes. And in the end, we had 700 boxes of clothing turn up to Katherine on 2 trucks. The women were absolutely astounded by the support. And within 3 months, they'd sold $10,000 worth of clothing. They'd formally incorporated their art centre and they bought all their own art supplies. The Remote Op Shop project is a network of op shops in remote First Nations communities. The op shops foster empowerment and self-determination and do 3 important things. They provide access to basic necessities such as clothing and household goods. They provide business training and enterprise learning opportunities, and they operate as a social enterprise, so the funds are pooled and then distributed to cultural projects within the community. For some of our more long-term communities, we've now developed a containerised op shop model. This serves as a model that can be replicated in other communities. It's more than just a retail space. It's a place for community to come and meet and to celebrate life and culture. Currently, we have a donor pool of around 35,000 people, and we have around 20 remote op shops. And that model has worked really well. But not a day goes by when I don't get a call from a woman in a community wanting to start this for her community. In order to be able to create efficiencies, in order to be able to get high quality stock, we're now engaging the fashion and textile industry to say, rather than sending your excess goods to landfill, you can be increasing your social impact by enabling communities to start their own enterprise. And what I've seen on the Facebook group is the women who are running the op shop posting messages saying how proud they feel about delivering this service to their community, about enabling their community to have access to clothing and household goods, as well as some of these women being cultural leaders, so they're able to use the funds to take young people out on country and pass on traditional knowledge. Very few things in remote communities are truly owned and led by the community. The Remote Op Shop project ensures that these op shops are owned and led by the women who run the op shop. We don't hold the keys. They can open and close it. They determine the money story. We're just there as an enabler to support them. I think coming in as a non-Indigenous woman and working in the Indigenous space, you have to come in here with a learner's mindset. You have to realise that you're stepping into someone else's culture. And so you have to be patient. And spending 10 years in a remote community is really just the starting point.
Tanya and the women of Yurupanga approached the scheme. They were having problems with mattresses in their community. They reached out to us thinking that potentially we could help. And next thing we know, in May last year, I travelled to Yurupanga, which is about 700 kilometres from Darwin, with Tanya and Quentin from the Remote Op Shop project, and Tennille Lavender, an Indigenous health researcher from New South Wales, who you'll hear from later on. When we were out there, what struck me was not so much that it was very remote, which it was, and it was very hot, which it was, or even the informal landfill at the end of town. It was seeing the mattresses themselves in use, realising what they had access to and what they could get up there, and none of those things were fit for purpose. It's seeing what they're sleeping on, and in many cases not sleeping on at all. That trip really embedded for the scheme what we think stewardship and EPR mean, and it truly is a basic human right for all in our communities to have an appropriate bed for a good night's sleep. But what does that have to do with product stewardship? And don't we just collect stuff and maybe we recycle it? We believe really strongly, and you can see that in the way we structure our scheme, stewardship shouldn't begin at the end. We need to begin at design. And we think about every part of the product's life, especially in communities where logistics and conditions challenge traditional thinking. You can't have stewardship as an afterthought. And I thought Suzanne in her talk yesterday spoke really clearly about that, and as did Tony. Stewardship has to be a system, it needs a framework, and that system starts at design and it ends with recovery that works in the real world, not just on a piece of paper. I think it's a key responsibility for producers and retailers to ensure that the products they create are fit for purpose in the communities in which they are sold. And that includes not just Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, it includes everywhere from Coogee to Kununurra and everywhere in between. And it was through that lens that we decided, well, we're a voluntary scheme, we can't give rebates, we can't pay for recycling, but we could maybe fix this. I think the biggest thing when we're talking about waste in remote communities and how it differs to, waste in the Southern Highlands where I'm from. Waste in remote communities doesn't start at the end of a useful life. It starts far earlier than that when a product fails. A mattress that costs $1,000 to deliver doesn't last one wet season. That failure has health consequences, especially for children. If you were sleeping on something that holds moisture, that can't be cleaned, that attracts pests, you are not uncomfortable, you are exposed. I'll touch on this more later with a video and some audio from Tennille, but I want to say at this point that rheumatic heart disease is one of the leading causes of early death in our remote communities, and a leading cause of the repeated infections that lead to rheumatic heart fever come from scabies and mites found in bedding. So this is a real health challenge, and it was through that lens that we started to talk to the community. We went up, we sat with the elders at Yurupanga, we had a yarning circle, and we came to the conclusion that yes, there was a waste problem in the town in recycling that needed to be dealt with, but what really needed to be looked at was a mattress that was fit for purpose in their communities. So we decided as a scheme with Tanya and the community that we would design a mattress from the inside out. The whole point of this is that it must be durable, it must be washable, and it must have a clear path for end-of-life recovery. If it can't last or it can't be cleaned, it shouldn't be in any of these homes. So we're in the very, very early stages of this, but there's a few key elements that we're looking at. Tracy, our Innovation Director, is the technical person, so I'm going to give you a very high-level overview of this. We're working with Swincell on Swinburne University on something called Swincell, which is basically a mould-resistant, washable, recyclable inner to replace the traditional springs and foam. Another thing that we're looking at, and we're taking a bit of inspiration from the outdoor hiking community here, is using a wool layer instead of the traditional quilting. Wool has a lot of antimicrobial, fire retardancy, it's natural. And there's a really interesting project that we're hoping to align with in Victoria, and it's about, meat sheep, like sheep that we eat. So the wool on those sheep is often sent to landfill. Now, it's not merino wool, you're not going to make a cashmere a scarf out of it, but it could work really, really well as a quilted layer in mattresses like this, and it's a really good reuse story. The other element that we really have to consider is the barrier cover. There needs to be one. We need to figure out what that looks like and what that works in community. So this is all a very long-term view, but while we're trying to design the perfect product, people are still sleeping on the floor. So we're just distributing existing mattresses now, not because they're perfect, because they aren't, but because they're better than what they have available today. And every bed and mattress that we can get into community gives us the data that we need to help design what's going to work for them. Our goal for this year is to get 5,000 beds into remote Northern Territory and Queensland communities. We're doing that with a little bit of help from our members. So the first beds to go up, over 100 of these beds have made it into Europunga so far, and we have gathered a lot of the feedback through those Facebook groups. The women talk on there about their feedback on the beds, whether they like them, what they don't like. So the first lot that went up was a very simple steel base from one of our members, Indigenous, and we're trialling a foam-based mattress with a washable cover that came from Vendella. Word of these beds has travelled all over. The Circular Nation team were at a gathering at the Job Expo in Fitzroy Crossing a few weeks ago in northwest WA. And everyone was asking them, hey, those beds that you've got in Europunga, how can we get some? Can we get them over here for our mob? So a big part of what we have to do is how do we now do this? How do we scale this? Another really interesting trial that we've had initially, some of you may have seen this, the circular bed was launched last year. This is a very simple bed base made from 100% recycled PET. It is very light, cleanable, hygienic, will make it through a wet season, easy to move around. It flat packs though. So we got it up to Darwin, but we were concerned about them being put together on community. So they put them together in Darwin and then sent them down. Unfortunately, that didn't work for transport. So we're back to the drawing boards with these, but this is why we do trials. We need to find out what works and what doesn't work. So I'm looking forward to seeing the next iteration of this. This is not a top-down solution. This is not us telling them this is what it should be. We're working alongside Tanya and her team, and we're working with community members who bring their lived experience into the design process. So it's not our manufacturers starting with a drawing board, it's starting with people telling us what they need, and that feedback and conditions is what's going to make this work. It's co-design, we're not dropping it in. But of course, the really big challenge is obviously logistics. So to make circularity real in remote areas, we need infrastructure, but we don't need mega facilities. We need to look at networks and hubs. The remote op shops are the network that we're looking to use. That is how we can get in and get access to those communities, and they act as a hub within their own community. We've had a bit of success in that we now have a little bit of a mattress hub in Darwin. Remote op shop and Circular Nation have secured a warehouse facility, and City of Darwin is about to start mattress recycling. So by combining those things there, it gives us that next connection. This is not just about recycling, and product stewardship is not just about recycling, it's about systems that work. We've got industry to the table helping design solutions for these communities, and I think it's scalable and it's replicable across other geographies and other waste streams. For any waste stream where design is failing remote communities. I think that there's a huge potential for collaboration, because what's true for me, it's true for textiles, it's true for a whole lot of other things, and if we do this together, I think we'll have far more success than just doing it alone. Just to go back to one of the really, really key things, and this is more than waste, Bad bedding creates health issues, and better products available in communities can stop that cycle. It's not hypothetical. We've been through the stats before. Those are mattresses that were in use on the community I visited. So this is something that we can do better at. I could tell you a little bit about the trip and the health aspects, but I'd really like you to hear from Tennille Lavender. I think she describes it perfectly, and you will get to see through this video some of the very first mattresses being delivered into the families.
Yama. My name's Tennille and I'm a Mankata Yuin and Aralin woman from the south coast of New South Wales. I'm also an academic who lectures in Indigenous health at the University of New South Wales, the Australian National University and Macquarie University. I am a PhD candidate at the University of New South Wales and a published poet. I live with my beautiful young boys on Biripi country. I was invited by Kylie, Tanya and the community to visit Yurapunga and experience firsthand some of the issues the community faces around safe sleeping. We know that sleep hygiene has a connection to rheumatic heart fever risk. Rheumatic heart fever is usually contracted in adolescence from a simple strep infection. Many of the beautiful children I had the pleasure of spending time with had runny noses. As a mum and a health professional, this broke my heart given the high likelihood in a few years that this would eventually morph into rheumatic heart disease. When a basic infection is left, and again the telltale signs are a runny nose, you think about how many of our children run around in winter with constant runny noses, especially if they attend daycare. The basic infection sits dormant and over time damages the child's heart valves until the onset of puberty, where it rears its ugly head and can lead to heart failure if left, and of course death. Australia and the Northern Territory have the highest incidence of rheumatic heart fever in the world. This is a national disgrace. Our kids deserve better. On arrival to Yurapunga, I was shocked at the lack of basic services that the community faces through no fault of their own. Access to clean water, garbage disposal, and electricity are all services that we take for granted, yet many of the Aboriginal communities don't have access to these. At Yurapunga, I was honoured to meet a local health worker in training, but shocked to find out that there were no basic medical facilities for him to practice from, let alone any specialist services around healthcare. The sheer overwhelm in those first few days was a struggle. I've spent many years lecturing young doctors about rheumatic heart fever with clear prevention strategies, yet they can't be applied due to the lack of basic needs such as clean bedding. As health professionals, we all know that a good night's sleep on bedding which is hygienic and fit for purpose is a building block for good health. However, I was moved by the connection to culture, the strength of family and kin, and the resilience and drive that the community and their elders demonstrated in their quest to improve their lives and the opportunities of their beloved children. As an Aboriginal woman and a researcher, I know that the solutions to many of the problems presented here today are already known to the community. Our job is not problem solvers. Our job is knowledge and access immobilizers. Successful initiatives fail if they're not led by community, and that is why I believe that this program is successful, even in its infancy, because it is led and supported by the community. Our next stage is to gather research and feedback on the mattresses, as well as train a local researcher to do the work on the ground when we're not there. This is in line with the community's goals of self-determination and will provide an ongoing employment and skill development for a community member. Thank you for your time today, and I hope that our presentation gives you something to think about.
I think that this work is very much about dignity, equity and access. If we fix design, we fix so much more than product performance or landfill capacity. We're helping to fix those systems and frameworks. On that, I would just say again, thank you for walking this journey with us, with Tennille, Tanya and I and my team. This project's really important to us, and I can only finish by saying again that circular solutions start at design and they do not stop at disposal. And I really believe that we can build systems and frameworks to support that through product stewardship schemes. And if you would like any more information or you have any questions on this project, please reach out. We would love to chat with you about it.
Thank you, Kylie. Sharing these stories really helps us to understand the complexities faced by remote communities and for us to better understand the work that ABSC is doing towards suitable mattress and bedding options. It's also really fantastic to see the work of the remote op shop, what they're actually doing, having recently made my first donation myself. So, our fourth and final presentation this afternoon is Dr. Enoch Menge. Dr. Menge is the Regional Manager of Waste Management at Central Desert Regional Council in the Northern Territory. Dr. Menge will be presenting on the valorisation of demolition concrete waste in remote Aboriginal communities. Welcome, Dr. Menge.
Thank you very much for that welcome. And I would also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this place and particularly also acknowledge the traditional owners of the area where I live and work. So I work in Walpri country and Machara, Aranda country. So those are the traditional custodians of the area around Alice Springs where we work. So we had used a very big word, valorization. And I thought about it over the last several weeks and said, let me simplify it. So it is basically recycling concrete and demolition waste in the communities. I just want to put a picture in your mind about the sort of challenge that we faced as we came up with the renewed waste management strategy for the council in 2023. We found that there were stockpiles of concrete, basically demolition waste, right across all our communities. And maybe just to give you a bit of a view about the council area stretches from, this is the border of Western Australia, and that's the border of Queensland. So it is a significant area. And let me just give you a picture of where the communities are located. So up here we do have Larger Manu, and then you come down closer to Alice Springs. You have Willora, Yundumu, Nirpi, Yulumu, Laramba, Ngawala, and Machara, and Atichara is the one which is to the extreme east. In terms of the area, I think in terms of the area, we have a land area of about 282,000 square kilometers. The population is about 4,500, and there are 4 local government wards with 12 communities. Each of the 12 communities has got a landfill. And in terms of cattle, economic activities, we have cattle stations, we have indigenous artwork, we have tourism and mining. But the majority of the population is in the low-income group. Now, these 12 landfills are located in each of those communities. So any thought of consolidating the material generated in those communities is simply out of question. So you really have to deal with waste wherever it is generated. Now, as we consider developing this new strategic plan, we discovered that there was a lot of legacy concrete waste that has been lying there, from all those previous government programs providing new housing. There was demolish the old house, put in a new one, which is good. It's an outcome all of us want for the communities. But where does the old building go? It goes to the landfill. And then the next time there is another round, same thing happens. So at the end of the day, you do find that you actually are running short of space at the landfill. Now somebody might ask, but you have vast spaces in the territory. Why are you worried about space? You will be surprised that actually the communities are found on land which has been excised from cattle stations. So they are actually limited in the amount of land available to provide such facilities. So there is increasing pressure on natural resources. We need to address climate change goals, just like everybody else. We have rising amount of average waste generated per person. We also have constraints on land availability, which I've just explained. So if we don't address this, we see a threat to our sustainability. Because going forward, where should we manage the waste? What will happen with all the waste generated? So there is going to be increased demand for land. And number two, there is potential uptake of recycled concrete, which will be, we see hope in the potential uptake of recycled concrete, which can be used as road-based aggregate and in hard-stand areas. So with this, we then decided we need to do something about it and obtained a grant from the government, which we used then to buy a crusher. But we were very clear about what we wanted from the crusher. We wanted a crusher that could be carried from community to community to actually carry out this process. Otherwise, we couldn't carry all the concrete to a central place and work on it. But there is a problem. So we have just talked about legacy concrete waste. When you go there, you find this stockpile of concrete waste. You can't just bring the crusher and start crushing it because you don't know what materials and the impurities and the contamination it has. So we have to examine each stockpile and decide whether it is ready to be processed or we need to leave it alone, particularly around issues of asbestos contamination. So the processes we inspect it. If we are happy, we then transport the machinery there, and the machinery, the crusher is able to crush the concrete, separate it into the rebars or reinforcement bars, and crush concrete. But then we needed to develop capacity in the community. We are not going to be going to the community to do stuff which people should be trained to do, which gives them independence and gives them the ability to actually live their lives. So we organized training for the community-based staff to actually be able to run the machinery that we had obtained. So we have had 2 sessions of training. One was done in T3, which is on the Stewart Highway, and the other one in Atichara, which is on the Plenty Highway. And you can see the men there, they are very happy. And some of those men are great operators of machinery, I can tell you. So, if you look up there, you'll see on the left picture a stockpile, a typical stockpile of the concrete, which has accumulated over time. And the next one to the right But then down here, you see the outcome or the result of a number of days of crushing. The crusher, these are the technical specifications of the crusher. So the crusher size is about 1.5 meters by 1.2 meters wide. So it is able to be carried from place to place to do this work. The hopper capacity is 2 meters cubed, and the feed size is about 1200 millimeter. The product size is less than 150 millimeters, so that's the size of the material. The feed material can be concrete, brick, stone, rubble, ceramics, anything. So it is able to deal with a lot of it. We have done a bit of laboratory testing of the material, and these are the technical specifications of the material that is produced from the crushing process. So this is leading us to now identify the applications, the potential applications of this material. Where can it be used? What exactly can it do well? And we have come to the realization that we might need to have a sieve or a screen to be able to separate into a few classes of materials which can be used for specific applications. So that is going to be our next purpose for some grant somewhere. So potential use will be in curbs, footpaths. Remember, in communities, we do need footpaths. A lot of communities need all these footpaths, they need curbs, they need what, all these things. We could actually have this manufactured right within the community and used there. So we are having great ideas. We are thinking that with a little bit of investment, that can be done. But of course, there are challenges. There is limited infrastructure at the community. We are not able, for instance, to measure how much concrete somebody is bringing in. We need to be able to tell that this contractor has brought 50 tons, and so they are supposed to pay so much. So the council, we suggested to the council that we need to be a bit more creative because we don't have the money to put weigh bridges everywhere. They are expensive pieces of infrastructure. So we are using a proxy method to actually do the estimate of material. There is also lack of capacity to collect relevant quantitative data. We need to know exactly how much material. Lack of access to value chains due to vast distances. Now, after we have made that material, if we were in town, we probably could sell it easily. But it is very far from the main urban centers. So we have to now think about other ways of absorbing the material. There's also reduced contractor compliance in remote locations. Remember, sometimes, not all of them, some contractors are really good, but some are really dodgy. So they will look as around, nobody's seeing me, and boom, and then they are gone. So then that remains your problem now to start following who was here last, who was doing some work here. And of course, that becomes, you said, he said. Lack of capacity to absorb all product generated within the communities and the need for adequate landfill facilities. So we need to actually improve the standard of our landfills, what is available, what equipment we have there, and so on and so forth. So the take-home message is that there is, I think, greater need for regulatory oversight over construction and demolition waste in our jurisdiction. Why do I say this? Because when the tender goes out for, say, buildings, 5 buildings in this community, somebody applies. This person is supposed to provide, at the least, an environmental management plan. But where does that go? Who gets to see it? It is supposed to be to the department which is announcing the tender, and then the department is supposed to share with us because we are at the receiving end of the waste. But we actually have not been seeing the environmental management plans. We are in the process of contacting the relevant people to make sure that they share this important document with us so we can hold the contractors to account when they are in the community. Otherwise, if we don't know, we don't know. The only thing we see is a building going up or a building going down. Number two, there should be a deliberate policy setting to stimulate that market. You know, if we are generating recycled materials, and if somebody was told, this material can actually be part of your new building, if the material meets their specifications, that would stimulate the market for this material that we are generating. But if there's no policy requirement, then of course people will do whatever they like. Finally, there's need to invest in landfill infrastructure improvement, at least in the larger communities, so that we can support the collection of data, which is useful for planning. It is not easy to get, as you saw, the population is just 4,200. So if you're trying to work on rates to be able to build your infrastructure, it will take you a bloody long time. So we need help to be able to upgrade our infrastructure so that we can offer a service that is comparable to other places. I think that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mende. It's really heartening to see the progress that has been made. I know I visited Yumendamu a few years ago and saw firsthand those challenges. But with these challenges, there are also opportunities for improvement and investment in these communities. I'd like to invite the speakers up onto the stage, and we'll have probably about 5 minutes for Q&A. If we could just get Slido up, because I can't access it, I'm sorry. Okay, no Slido for this session, but if there's any questions from the floor, we've got a microphone we can bring to you.
My question's for Kylie. When you're sending in the mattresses to the remote communities, are you taking away the old mattresses for safe disposal?
Bought by a couple of logistics providers, chiefly Global Express and Nighthawk Transport. Problem is at the moment that's essentially, it's not funded. So we need to find a longer term solution where it's economically viable to do it. But at the moment, yes, it's being done and we're funding it. Are
there any other questions from the floor? No? Okay. Well, I'd like to thank, oh, sorry, we do have one. Daniel, sorry.
Thanks. Question to Enoch. Wondering if there's any like larger councils across Australia or commercial providers that have bits of kit and tools and little bits of infrastructure that they might be upgrading, that they could send you stuff that still works, that you might be able to put to good use at your facilities.
That is a very interesting remark. Actually, if there's anybody hearing that, please let's have a chat because we will actually welcome any such donations. That would be most welcome because the truth is that something is better than nothing.
Yeah, and if it still works and it's got 10 years, 20 years, then that's an improvement, yeah?
Yep, absolutely. Any
final questions? I don't want to stand between you and dinner. No? Okay. I'd just like to thank our speakers, Nathan, William, Kylie and Enoch, for presenting this afternoon on our Indigenous waste management stream. For those attending the conference dinner, pre-dinner drinks will be commencing at 6:15 on the Bayside Green at Pacific Bay Resort. For everybody else, the next conference session will begin here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. I'd just like to thank you all for your attendance and participation.